We will spend about 5 minutes. I'll talk about a Lenovo perspective of what we see in this segment in industry and where we see things evolving. This is not a session of Lenovo talking about their portfolio and products. You can always learn about that. But this, we thought it'd be useful for you as a fellow customer or business partner to learn from your peers about their own experiences of deploying some of these technologies. So most of the bulk of the time we'll spend on just going over some questions around what they're doing in their environment and what challenges and why eye-opening key learnings that they had that they could share. So we hope that you will be able to leverage that. And then towards the end, please don't go away. If you didn't get a ticket, get that from a Lenovo batch person. We will have a drawing for something cool, and you have to be here to win it, of course. Okay. So with that, I'm Shekhar Mishra. I am responsible for our software-defined business unit at Lenovo Data Center Group. So everything around cloud and hyper-converged model falls in my purview. And obviously, most of the announcements here on Azure Stack HCI, those are also part of my responsibility, and strong relationship with Microsoft. So just before we jump into HCI, I thought, just flash a slide. I like this slide from perspective because it shows that how this industry, the data center, has evolved in last, I would say a couple of decades, right? Where things actually, don't go too far away from each other. Like you have this huge centralization, then you go disaggregation, then you go distributed, then again centralization. What has really started changing the game is where you start seeing that some of the software-defined concepts, it's not a new concept. I mean, with hyper-converged, we've seen that it has taken to the next level where we software defining some of the other pieces outside of the compute is coming into play. But as you see that, there were several things that started as a technology and architecture, and then there were some prohibitive aspects of it that then evolved to something else, whether it be a technical reason or a business reason. For instance, I mean, in my view, converged infrastructure, that was purely a business thing where a lot of customers are saying, you really need a PhD to manage and set up a network and a storage and compute and make that all work together and manage it in day-to-day work. And then, this gave birth to CI, where a lot of the pre-integrated solutions, nothing big changing in the architecture itself, but more of the pre-integration and packaging and simplifying some of the deployment aspects. Hyper-converged kind of took it to the next level where it really said storage doesn't need to be complex. It really can be simple. And that's where it kind of took off. And we see that evolving into a lot of the cloud model. If you see today, most of the cloud deployment model is some aspects still uses hyper-converged architecture underneath it. And then obviously there's building on top of it beyond it, whether you look at VMware or Microsoft or Nutanix, for instance, right? So this is just to remind ourselves that, things go in circle, but not every architecture or every design is fit for each and every workload. So as a customer or partner, we always encourage our customers to look at what is the pain point they're trying to solve and then fit the best architecture to that need. Just because HCI or cloud or some specific architectures out there doesn't necessarily all mean that it solves everything for you, right? The other aspect that you probably would have gleaned through several of the last few conferences that you've been here is, and I'm sorry I'm guarding you, Phil, a little bit, is this whole concept of edge to cloud. Now, if you think about how the whole the data aspect of things has been moving and changing, right? You had initially where there were data centers were kind of the center and hub of all the data, where you have big petabytes of storage, and that's where you crunch and analyze your data and make, hopefully make some business decisions coming out of those. And then a lot of that data then flew out to your end user customers as, whether it is through, some sort of targeted marketing or campaigns and things like that, right? Things have kind of turned on its head with this explosion of, a lot of multiple endpoints from which this customers can today acquire a lot of the data about their end user and consumer of their products. And they want to make sure that they're not only capturing the data, but also analyzing and making use of it and make further business decisions as fast as you can. There are certain use cases and segments where if the data is more than like an hour old, it's already useless for them, right? Even in some pieces, it's less than, and 10 minutes old, it's useless for them. So that is causing the whole shift around, a lot of endpoints around IoTs that we've been talking about, which is giving, in turn, the accumulation of all the edge devices, because not everything can be moved fast because of latency or whatever the things would be to your core data center right away. So drives a lot of the deployment of edge solutions. And one of those we talked about yesterday that you saw on stage about our latest solution from Lenovo around the Think Agile MX or the SE350, right? A perfect solution. You can put one or two node of these clusters and deploy it anywhere on the side of a room, and you don't need a network switch, and you can accumulate, from your endpoints a lot of the data, and then you sync it up to a lot of your endpoint and your core data center. A lot of other industries use the same concept. For instance, cruise ships. I mean, when they go out, imagine the amount of data that they can generate out of the captive customers they have packed in that one ship, and they actually don't have anywhere else to go. So they're, spending their money, eating, doing a lot of activities, and they accumulate a lot of that. And also the logistics are different things that are working on the ship itself. But they are in nowhere in the sea, so they cannot just, put all that data right away and sync it. So they need some devices that are on board to capture a lot of this, and then when they get back, they sync up all of that. So there's similar lot of use cases around manufacturing, healthcare, and things like that. So what you'll see is a lot of explosion and reverse of how this data is actually going to flow, and ultimately going back to the data center, not the other way that used to be, right? So talking about HCI itself, when HCI took off, it's been about 4 or 5 years now where you started seeing it started a lot of the traction in the market. And when I started this portfolio about 4 or 5 years back, and we had started very small, very, focused use cases. Like most of the customers that we would talk to, they would have certain greenfield applications that they want to deploy, or, they want to just start fresh with certain applications. VDI was one of the top use cases, right? What we are seeing now is it is going beyond just the tier 2 applications. Now customers are so much more comfortable with HCI as a technology that we have started seeing a lot of the tier 1 applications and mission critical applications, like people leveraging SAP HANA running on HCI, blockchain running on HCI. So you can see that a lot of these new use cases coming up, and like the most recent, the HCI architecture around Robo and Edge is a perfect mix, right? You need a small footprint, you need a high-performing architecture, and you need the ability to scale when you need to. Everything what HCI can deliver, right? And that's why you see that a lot of these architectures started kind of extending itself to the Edge use case in this matter too. By the way, if you're not aware, and we'll talk a little bit about that with Carmen, about the new badge concept that they have. Lenovo already has badge around SQL and the branch office and Edge solutions. It's basically a pre-configured, pre-tested, qualified solutions that our customers can then easily take and deploy, knowing that it has been pre-tested to deliver a certain level of performance, right? And we have excellent results around our SQL that we'll share with you. So with that, what we'll do is now turn over to our panelists and talk about, their environment and see that how much of, what we've been and I've been sharing does it align with what they believe is happening in their environment, okay? So we'll just take a few seconds and maybe start with you, Carmen, and just introduce yourself and provide, what you do so that everyone has a context when they hear from you, okay? So there's a mic. And, yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be hard to hear me. My name is Carmen Crincoli. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I run the Azure Stack HCI partner program. So I work very closely with Lenovo and other OEMs to participate in the program to test and validate their solutions, put them in the catalog. As you've maybe heard in other sessions, right, the big focus for Microsoft this Ignite is Intelligent Edge and kind of the evolution of the Azure Stack family. Azure Stack is now more of a family of solutions, right? There's Azure Stack Hub, which is known as just Azure Stack previously, about really having Azure in your data center and Azure capabilities and Azure APIs and the same way of managing in intermittently connected or disconnected scenarios. Then there's Azure Stack Edge, previously known as Databox Edge. That's about having edge computing capabilities driven directly through the Azure portal. And then there's Azure Stack HCI. It's really about traditional virtualized infrastructure with hybrid cloud capabilities that you can attach to those workloads. And that's my view of the world. I'm sorry, what was the other thing you wanted me to talk about?
No, for now, I think the introduction is good, and we'll get back to...
Okay.
I appreciate you clarifying the whole branding thing. I'm sure a lot of people have questions about that.
And we'll get into the workload stuff a little later. That was announced yesterday during Bernardo Caldas' session. And it's one of the things we worked on quite closely with Lenovo over the last months or so, particularly around the SQL one, where we've had some really great numbers.
Yep.
But they really have a lot of different use scenarios that we want and that we think Lenovo's hardware is really well positioned for.
Thank you, Carmen.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Andreas Subsuk, and I'm working as a senior consultant and partner in a consultancy company called CC Global. I'm also an Azure MVP, so I work a lot on the hybrid data center using Azure Stack and Azure Stack HCI for the on-premises and Azure for the cloud. We have been working closely with Lenovo on deploying various solutions for our customers around the world, from 2 nodes to 50 nodes, I think, is the biggest one, with automation on the top, so broad variety on services we do.
Good afternoon. My name is Håkon Svendsen. I work for a Norwegian service provider called Bråtgruppen. We started with Azure Stack HCI late in 2016 with a POC. And currently today we have around 10 clusters and 50 nodes in production.
Thanks, Håkon.
My name is Ronny Bachmann. I work as a cloud solution architect for Cloudion in Denmark. We predominantly provide hybrid use case scenarios or public cloud. And we've built since about 2016 on Azure Stack HCI. And we're slowly transitioning customers over into a hybrid use scenario with Azure Stack Hub, with Edge and HCI to support that for specific workload cases.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Good afternoon all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Philip Moss. I am Chief Product Officer at an organisation called Acuutech. Acuutech is a UK-based service provider, and we have worked for many, many years in advanced Microsoft technology. We work on a global customer base, delivering advanced solutions on Azure Stack HCI and building automation and workflow on top of that platform to integrate directly into the Azure public cloud experience.
Thank you, Phil. As you can see, pretty energetic crowd here. So, and we have a short 45 minutes, so feel free to catch them afterwards too if you have more questions later. But so with that, let me start with you, Håkon. I know that you mentioned that as part of your process of selecting the right HCI platform and then landing with Azure Stack HCI, you went through a pretty lengthy POC process and to evaluate all of that, which is pretty common in a lot of customers. So love to share your experience of, first of all, what did that process look like, and was there specific configurations, and then what was kind of your criteria of success there that helped you land to your selection?
Yes. As I said, we are a service provider, so we have quite a broad view of workloads from our customers. Our main goal was to look for more infrastructure, simplify it. It sounded natural to look into the Azure Stack HCI. The POC went well. We got the results we were hoping for. And I guess the key takeaways from that was it greatly simplified our infrastructure. And the technology was well known. We were Hyper-V focused since 2012 R2. So all the technical engineers, they could use their skills from Hyper-V directly into the HCI platform. And the third thing was it gave us great performance and stability and security. So I guess that's...
Okay. Thanks for sharing. So this is kind of aligns with sometimes, even when I talk to my team, we get so much focused and bogged down about this is performing, speeding fast than this guy, and that could be the winning thing. A lot of times it is simpler business reasons too, as Håkon mentioned, that they already had a lot of skills around Microsoft. That sometimes make the decisions easier for the customer, right? So we had to look at both the technology aspect and the business aspect as you are evaluating your solutions. Let me ask you, Andreas, one of the things is that a lot of times when customers are moving into this new technology, and HCI being one of them, one of the things that we early on run into a lot is customers are mostly comfortable at carving out a green workload, greenfield, meaning this is a new thing and I'll just start with this and try it out. But now that we're seeing people are migrating from their old other workloads into HCI platforms, how do you help customers in that transition process if it is not brand new, they're just transitioning and moving to something like Azure Stack HCI?
So most of the customers we have been deployed over the past few years has been existing Hyper-V customers that was looking at a natural transition to Azure Stack HCI to get a more simpler infrastructure, save a lot of money on not having to have a fiber channel infrastructure, have a SAN and all that. So they were already Hyper-V customers, and Azure Stack HCI just being Hyper-V, it is really, really easy for most of the customers just to move what they have today live without any downtime into the Azure Stack HCI solutions.
Okay. And other piece that I also wanted you to elaborate on, Andreas, since you have the mic, is one of the things about HCI is it focuses and solves you mostly, or at least what the customers look at is my compute and my storage problem, right? But a lot of the customers today are still deploying it either connected to a 10 gig and now maybe moving to 25 and 100 gig switch networking, but that is still kind of outside of the scope of HCI. I understand that in your environment, you actually not only did the HCI, but you ended up doing the SDN deployment also. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for all the deployments we have done for the past few years, we have only done the 100 gigabit implementation simply because the price difference from 10 gig to 100 gig is so small. There is no use case for not going that way at all to be future-proof. And using the Lenovo NE 132 switches, which is 32 ports, 100 gig port, I think. Mm-hmm. We have all the capabilities and all the offload technologies we need for the storage part, but also all the BGP features and flexibility and automation we need to implement the software-defined network layer. And not many people is aware of the software-defined network layer in Windows Server data center licensing. So when you have paid for your Hyper-V license, you already have the license you need for the Azure Stack HCI and the storage part, and for the networking part. Mm. So it's a natural move to software define the entire stack, and then you don't need to worry more about it, and you have the flexibility to scale and secure your workloads.
That's a very good point, as you said, that you're already paying for something. A lot of customers, in my view, today are not using it. But was it really a difficult thing for you to set up, the SDN piece of it?
The SDN piece on its own is pretty easy to set up. You need to do the right network design from the start, so building out a spine leaf setup if you want to have the flexibility and scalability in the solution. If you don't do that, then it can be hard to scale. But once you have your physical network in place, the SDN part is really, really easy to deploy. you can quickly scale up and down, create secure networks, and get all of the, or many of the known security features from the Azure network into your Azure Stack HCI on-premises.
Okay, thanks. Let me come to you, Ronnie. You are in a unique situation. Like when I look at Microsoft's story, right? I mean, I feel that they have the most complete story here when you talked about my slide here earlier from public cloud to on-prem to edge, like that whole covers, right? And you have a unique where you have pretty good large-scale deployments where you help your customers not only on Azure Stack HCI, but on Azure Stack also, right? So do you, from your deployments and experiences, have you seen that there is a synergy when customers are adopting both of these technologies between them?
Yeah, I think that if you go back about 2 years, the use case for is now Azure Hub, Azure Stack Hub, it wasn't as large as we see today. It actually requires scale before you can start splitting up between an HCI infrastructure and an Azure Hub infrastructure. But once you get to that scale, you actually get the possibility to start leveraging use cases around mission-critical workloading. SQL is a good example. Extended support license problems is the thing we've been doing for the past 6 months or so, is solving that through some of these solutions. And it becomes a lot more about finding the right combination of hybrid cloud rather than you going all in on one or the other. So it's more of a component-based infrastructure that we start seeing specifically for customer cases.
Okay. So do you see like your customers, do they adopt Azure first and then they're slowly moving in that direction? Or do you, I mean, is there a pattern there of how some of these work?
I don't think there's a one generic pattern that will fit everybody, but I think it's a lot about people seeing the benefit of public cloud, but having restrictions, whether that being financial services or robo-sites, low latency problems, or remote offices, whatever the reason is that you have that you can't necessarily go to public cloud. This is where Azure Stack and Azure Stack HCI and edge casing, this is where you need to start thinking about these cases differently, and you can actually solve these problems really, really effectively today.
Okay.
You couldn't do this 5 years ago. You simply didn't have the options of it.
Okay.
So a lot of new technology has come out that is available today that you can actually sit down and use to solve these edge cases.
Okay. Thanks, Ronnie. Let me come to you, Phil. I mean, Phil is one of the guys I met to him here, and he's like the most enthusiastic HCI guy here. You can tell, right? So the obvious question to you would be, I think, to give your perspective around, like when I look at this segment, there's a lot of different HCI solutions. Actually, there used to be a lot more, right? And then there has been consolidation, and there are several HCI stacks and pretty good, respectable stacks in the market. But you have kind of, looked and kind of compared and have a perspective on, what you believe is the benefits of Azure Stack HCI that, you want to share.
Sure. So let's go back a step. We work with a lot of organizations around the world, and organizations, when they're looking at the infrastructure solutions, go through this evaluation. They're saying, we need performance, we need cost, we need efficiency. And they look at multiple platforms. They look at other vendor solutions, which have their pros and cons. But time and again, we are seeing that Azure Stack HCI always wins on highest performance on commodity hardware, running on Think Agile MX, delivering all the solutions and capabilities in one box. There isn't that extra license for software-defined networking. There isn't that extra license for storage. Hyper-V is in box. And remember, there's also those enhanced capabilities like security built in within the solution. And both of those factors, that performance coupled with everything in the box, delivers an ROI calculation that is significantly better than other vendor offerings. And what is interesting is, when we started doing this, our foundation is being a service provider. And service providers, and I share the floor with many of them, my fellow cohorts in this industry, we're always fanatical about driving down cost and delivering solution. And it was the service providers who embraced Azure Stack HCI. They recognized those cost and performance benefits. But as the market and the technology has matured, we've now seen broad engagement around multiple business sectors and multiple sizes of organization. And we are seeing that accelerate month on month on a global client base.
Thank you. So you mentioned something about cost being a big thing around service providers. I'm sure if I ask a direct question to customers, they'll say, it's like almost asking, do you like ice cream? Cost is always there. What do you think about the announcement yesterday, a 2-node cluster for edge environment at $20,000?
So the 2-node scenario is a very, very, very powerful scenario. Now, everyone talks about this in terms of the edge scenario, but let's think about the people who really need these very small 2-node clusters. These are the organizations who historically have been using a server in the corner, a RAID controller with a dusty server under someone's desk. That wasn't giving them high availability. That wasn't giving them failover. What is very powerful about this ability to do 2 nodes at under $20,000 with the software solution is that these companies can now engage in a highly available, scalable platform with hybrid connectivity at a price point that simply was not possible before and is not possible for other vendors. And this is opening up entire new markets. We are seeing significant growth in many of the Asian markets where price is absolutely critical. And this is an area that traditional solutions just were not viable. But $20,000 for a high-performance 2-node solution is a breakthrough into that market segmentation.
Thanks, Phil. Let me come to you, Carmen. From Microsoft perspective, we heard a lot of good things yesterday. I think it'll be helpful if you can summarize, because when I had several customer meetings and stuff, and still there's some confusion around what was branded what, and how do you position your portfolio in this journey from edge to cloud, right? So can you briefly spend a couple of minutes talking about that?
Yeah, the branding thing has been an evolution, particularly
Sure.
particularly around.
We all go
the
through
edge.
that. So that's fine.
So it kind of what I said earlier. That was one of the big announcements in Satya's keynote yesterday. Was just trying to make it clear where the different Azure Stack pieces represent the highest business value and what capabilities they bring. Right, there's different parts of the spectrum of hybrid. So again, the hub part is really about Azure inside of your data center, right? Azure services, not all of them, but key critical ones that customers want most operating inside of your infrastructure. Consistent experience with the Azure portal, consistent APIs. If you already have dev teams doing Azure work and you need to not do it in the public cloud, you need to do it in your data center, you want Azure Stack Hub. And edge is all the way down at the other end. You don't need highly available, but you do need the ability to process data at the edge.
Right.
But you don't want local infrastructure management costs to go with it, because you need 100 of these, and you already have your entire workflow in the Azure portal. That's what Azure Stack Edge is doing for you. All of that compute processes out in your environment, in your locations, but it still looks like Azure resources. And then HCI is really about more traditional IT practice. You're modernizing existing infrastructure, right? You're replacing aging infrastructure. You need the ability to bring in hybrid services to that infrastructure in a quick and easy way, while still maintaining compatibility, maintaining legacy systems that you just don't have the ability and time to modernize. So we let you modernize around a fast, reliable, affordable HCI infrastructure, and then easily attach hybrid services from Azure to that infrastructure.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things, other aspect that I showed earlier was your badge program.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, what is the benefit to a customer of having a program like that?
Sure. Well, if you think about it, when we launched Azure Stack HCI, it was really an infrastructure program, right? And infrastructure is great. I'm assuming most of the people in this room like working with infrastructure, and that's why you're here to hear about it. But it's very generic, right? It's a building block. It doesn't in and of itself solve customer business problems. And most of you, when you go to work, you're tasked with solving or fixing a business problem. So we wanted to kind of close that gap and not just say, here's a really fast node that can do anything you want it to do. It's here's a configuration that can actually solve the business problems that customers come to us with and say, listen, that's great. Can I run SQL on it? Well, of course you can. Well, what's the best way to run SQL on it? And that's what this this workload use case program is. So we work together with our partners who actually build these systems out, and we say, we want to design an optimal solution based on your hardware platform. Why don't you spec that out? We'll give you the Microsoft best practices. You provide the hardware best practices and configuration. We'll document them, provide them to customers, so they can go to the catalog and say, I'm looking for a SQL solution. Which ones are available from Lenovo? I'm interested in that one. Okay, if I buy these and configure them the way that Lenovo tells me and Microsoft tells me, I know I'm going to get a good experience running SQL on top of HCI. So we're doing that with the 5 basic ones we launched. I don't want to say basic. The 5 ones we launched because that's what was ready. VDI, SQL, virtualized infrastructure, scale-out storage, and the one I always forget. Oh yes, Azure Robo, the one we're mostly talking about today. Which is why I've totally forgotten about it. But we're going to add more over time as we take the time to learn, figure out how to document these things. We're going to add a Kubernetes one in the near future, and SQL, additional SQL scenarios, things like that. So we're going to expand this over time and try and give more business value as part of this program.
And that's an excellent point. I see that is a great benefit for our partners and partners like you guys who are actually our service providers to your end customers, that you have some sort of a guidance where, hey, if you need a SQL workload to be run, then you know that where you can start with. So that's great. Thanks. Let me come back to Håkon for a second. So you mentioned that in your environment, not only you did the POCs, right? But you have several clusters, and your cluster size is relatively smaller. You said about 5 nodes cluster. So is there any decision criteria goes when you are deciding on how big a cluster size should be? Because at the end of the day, you are kind of helping or hosting your end customers, right? So is there any decision criteria of cluster size, or is it just something that you just follow that fixed pattern?
Yeah, that's a good question. We started with the POC, so it was 4 node back then, and actually it's not a hard limit for us. We have also been running 8 node cluster for some time, but for the moment we find it a good balance between the number of virtual machines inside a cluster, and since we're a service provider, we like to group some workloads around the clusters as well.
Okay, so basically common workloads, so you can maintain the configuration aligned to those workloads.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Andreas, when you were talking about software-defined networking, one other aspect from a HCI perspective, which is one of the big value proposition of HCI, is manageability, right? And understand that you do some unique things around the manageability, not only the day 0, but the ongoing day 1 that helps your end customers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So you're referring to the clarity part of it?
Right, and the mesh architecture and stuff that you work on.
I don't work on mesh.
Mesh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
So initially when we started our journey looking into Azure Stack and Azure Stack HCI, we were looking out for a hardware partner that we could team up with that fits our deployment methods, which is automation. So at our first talk at Lenovo, we knew that this was the right partner for us because Lenovo has the broad variety of tools and has everything software defined, from the configuration of switches and servers and all the way up, maintaining everything using the xClarity administrator tool. So the way we always deploy our clusters is with automation from the start, so racking the servers and putting in the cables. That's what we do from the server perspective. And then the rest is done with PowerShell script that is pushing configurations for both the switches and the servers, and maintaining them all the time, patching and all that.
Okay, that sounds good. Let me come to you, Ronnie, for a second. So we talked about your Azure Stack HCI and Azure Stack deployments. If you can share, where do you see yourself going next beyond that for your customers? Where do you seeing more of the requirements and demand coming from?
I think it's going to be a split focus. So I think we're going to keep seeing a lot of robo-casing, a lot of small siding, which is where HCI really excels at actually delivering performance without increasing cost. And then I think we're going to see HCI really fill out the gap around their high-performance workload, predominantly database services, VDI services, these very unique workloads, and you're going to see the big blob of your infrastructure move over to Azure Stack. It's a cost-effective platform if you don't need high compute performance or you don't need very specific workload run. I think it's going to be a hybrid use case as we see today, where some stuff in public cloud, but a lot of stuff still consisting in hybrid cloud, and a lot of it on MX solutions or SMX solutions.
Okay, makes sense.
A lot of what we see today, but I think it's going to accelerate a lot. At least that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a larger increase in demand for actual solutions to be delivered.
Okay, all right, thanks. Phil, let me come to you. Given that we just talked about, public cloud, hybrid, one of the things that, we get asked a lot when we are talking to end customers who are in their journey and deciding this whole, how do we get to the cloud bandwagon, right? Because this is a mandate either coming from, hey, are you cloud ready? And most of the time they don't even know what does cloud ready mean. So from your perspective, when you are talking to these very customers and helping them, can you talk to what is the key decision criteria that help them decide, hey, I need to go towards public, I need to go towards hybrid, or I'm happy with HCI, and how do they land to those?
That is a wonderful question, right? And a question I receive many times a month. What is interesting is, and I'm sure many of you in this room experienced this, the CEO says you've got to embrace cloud. So you go and embrace cloud. And what I've seen over the last few years is many organizations have put everything into the cloud or have spun around, flat spinning, not sure what to do. And what is important, and I talk about this a lot with organizations, is there are services that are logical to run externally. Great example. Productivity services like Office. That is a much better service to run externally to your organization. There are also services, though, that are better to run internally, to run on-prem, when either latency or security or geo-sovereignty are critical. Those are the applications that are logical to run internally. And then when I work with organizations, it's really important to help them understand that then when they can leverage hybrid is when they can drive down cost by leveraging hybrid. For example, moving back up to hybrid-based cloud services on top of Azure Stack HCI. And then it becomes much easier for organizations to understand this is the infrastructure I run internally on Azure Stack HCI. These are services I consume via a public external cloud of some description. And these are where I take hybrid synergies. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to deliver working productivity solutions to our users and not have our CEOs going, you've just spent too much money. Let's save more money. And at the end of the day, this is what we all want to achieve. And by taking these simple decisions, we can resolve those conflicts and plan better infrastructure solutions.
Thanks, Phil. That's very good. Anyone want to add anything to that, or from your perspective? No? Okay. I want to open up as any questions from the audience. There is 2 microphones on 2 sides. If there's anything, or you can just scream. That'll work too. No
we
questions?
cannot see a thing, by the way, due to the lights.
If you raise your hand.
So, Håkan, how many clusters are you running?
Today we're running 10 clusters.
And from 4 to 8 nodes or more?
Yeah, right now it's 4 to 6 nodes, the mix.
Okay.
So, and Lance, what about the S10 solution? What is the purpose of that concept and how many clusters are?
So we have just deployed a new customer in Norway that is a service provider delivering managed services for around 2,000 customers, I think. And they, of course, want to do some micro-segmentation between all these customers. Instead of doing VLANs all the time, they wanted to have a software-based layer. So we have 3 10-node clusters with full 100 gig backbone and a Lenovo-based spine leaf setup for the network to give them the flexibility and scalability that they are needing right now.
So if I may, I'm going to just let you double tap on that for a second. What was the key driver to move away from VLANs to SDN? Was it cost and flexibility? You know, I think it'd really help the audience to understand why the customer wanted to move away from those rigid networks.
It was mainly the microsegmentation part, so the ability to create VM-based ACLs and VM-based network quality of service to ensure the performance of the VM as well. That follows the VM instead of following the VLAN, because essentially
decouple the network management from the infrastructure layer into the software-defined layer.
That's the whole point
Exactly.
of,
Yeah.
that makes
so
sense.
instead of having a central firewall being the never-ending bottleneck that you need to scale, and firewall capacity is usually very, very expensive, they can use then the ACLs, port ACLs on the VM instead, and control that more flexible, spinning up new workloads, scaling more networks for their customers.
That's great. One other thing I wanted to highlight, you mentioned that you guys went to 100 gig. Just raise of hands, how many of you already have 100 gig networks in your environment? So I can't see all hands, but I think it's about between 5 to 8 maybe. So that's what I would have expected, frankly. So was there a decision criteria that so you mentioned the cost, right? And that you got the switches, they were not too much expensive. But are you seeing a lot of incremental value of getting onto a 100 gig backbone?
Well, if we take, the first is the price. For 4-node installation, the price difference from 10 gig to 100 gig is $2,000 to $3,000 for the entire installation.
Wow.
So it's more or less nothing when you look at that. So it's about being prepared for the future. And since the network is our rate controller in storage spaces direct, we need that bandwidth to ensure that we don't get any congestion issues. So that gives us more than enough bandwidth to be able to scale both the storage and the network at the same time. So in the installation we just did, which is based on some Optane cards for all flash and some hybrid for the non-SQL workloads. We can do full storage speed, so around 8 million IOPS for a cluster, and still get 50 gigabits throughput inside a VM on the virtual network at the same time.
And you raise a very good point, because a lot of times when people are deciding this, there's this legacy mentality that what Ethernet and SAN age, right, where they're thinking that, oh, I used to have 10 gig and that was plenty, but at that time you were only running your IP traffic. You're now running your data traffic also, and people forget that. By the way, where is FCOE? I don't hear about that at all nowadays.
Legacy technology. Yeah, legacy technology. I think I'm going to really stress this. I'm going to stick my engineer's hat on for a second. All of you, when you think about your designs, the east-west networking is now your primary data transport plane. I cannot stress how highly important it is to have sufficient capacity to drive that. If we look at the modern disk performance subsystems, NVMe, high-performance SSD, they can drive I/O at a level that your networking is now your performance bounding box. And as you're seeing here, adopting 100 gig is absolutely critical as we move forward into these pure solid-state node generation of solutions.
Thank you, Phil. Last question. Yeah.
Are you running RDMA? If you are, Rocky, iWork, at what speeds?
Okay, so let's break that two ways. So the question to the panel is, are they using RDMA? And I'll let them answer in a second. So there are two primary RDMA standards out there, iWarp and Rocky. We won't get into a conversation about which one is better. But guys, let's do a straw poll. Rocky or iWarp?
Rocky V2.
Rocky V2. Rocky V2. Rocky V2. You guys do any long range at all?
Yeah. No.
So you don't do any long range? No long range? You're doing long range over Rocky? Yep. Right, so they are all doing Rocky.
So Rocky
We do Rocky and iWarp. Yes, we do.
And are you running with or without Rocky?
Oh God, no, I would, sorry, forgive me. Storage Spaces Direct without RDMA would be a non-supported scenario and would be configuration suicide. No, do not do that.
That's not true. That's not true. It's supported without RDMA, but there are skill limits that you should be aware of.
You do not do.
No one sells a solution right now without RDMA, and I will approve one will hit scale limits soon. So
Are you paying extra for RDMA? That's the question.
what's that?
Are you paying extra for RDMA on those NICs? Is it like a software license?
They're already baked into all these solutions.
Then why won't you enable it? It's a
No
no-brainer.
vendor's going to sell one without one because it's the only way that you can reasonably take one of these solutions and say this will scale from all the way from 2 nodes to 16 nodes. So it is possible to operate without it, but I would say from a Microsoft perspective, we would be very nervous the second you added a 5th node to a non-RDMA cluster. But it's supported, and there are scenarios where we would actually suggest it, particularly if you have a switching setup that is not capable of handling RDMA flow in the way that's necessary. You can actually have a worse experience with RDMA in some scenarios, in which case we would rather you upgrade your network infrastructure to fix that. But it is possible. I'm just saying, don't walk out of here and be like, oh my God, Microsoft, we will support you. We just don't want you to do it.
So don't use it.
So bottom line, you're saying don't do it.